Welcome to our channel. Today we're making a Heidebrot. This is what it looks like, and this is how it looks inside. A delicious wheat rye bread with real sourdough and a wonderful fragrant aroma. A bit of caraway in it, simply a delicious treat. The ingredients for our Heidebrot. First, the main dough consists of rye flour 997 and dark wheat flour. I use type 1050. We have a bit of yeast, salt and caraway. And here the dough is divided because I will prepare a pre-dough before making the main dough. It consists of 20 grams of sourdough starter, 150 grams of rye flour, and 120 grams of water. Very important for this dough, the water is warm and I will mix it by hand right away. 1 minute or two? And then it sits for 12 hours, maybe 14 hours in a warm room. It needs to rise. It has a truly wonderful effect, makes the bread rise beautifully and gives it a fantastic flavor. The pre-dough, as I said, is incredibly simple. Here I have the flour. Now I add my sourdough starter to the flour. By the way, this is a sourdough I made using dark wheat flour and yogurt as a base. It works really well, tastes wonderful, is very stable for baking, so I can work with it easily. And we will go into detail about this in a later video. Just as a quick note at this point. And now I add some water. And I stir the whole thing together. It doesn't need to become a dough now. I just stir it until I'm sure the water has pretty much reached everything. Even if it hasn't reached everything, it should at least get to the flour. And now I have to pick it up like this. I hope you can see it. It will swell up on its own, so you don't need to worry about it. This is going to become a wonderful, beautiful pre-dough. So that took about a minute, and as you can see, that's all there is to it. I'll just scrape the rest off the spoon. The whole thing is a bit sticky, but it will soften up on its own then. Now, of course, I scrape down the sides and push everything together a bit with my spatula. And this is what it looks like now. That's it. As I said, let it sit for 12 to 14 hours at room temperature. It doesn't have to be overly warm, but it shouldn't be cold either. By the way, for this pre-dough, the water should be warm. Nicely warm. Hand warm, as they say, around 30 degrees Celsius. Yes, now this pre-dough is working for us. For the main dough, I take the flour. I'm using caraway seeds here. You can use bread spice or you can leave it out. I like it with caraway, that's 3 grams. Whole caraway seeds, they go right into the flour. Of course, you add some salt. As always, I mix it together a bit. Here I have yeast, which I now crumble into my water so that it dissolves a little. I'll stir that in a moment. Yes, and this is our pre-dough. You can see it turned out well. This is what it looks like. You can tell how nicely it has developed, how well it has risen. That goes into the bowl first now as well. That's easier when kneading because then no flour can get under the dough you're kneading and settle as leftover material. And you would have to stop and work that out again. So always start with the soft ingredients and put those into the bowl first. The same goes for the water, which is going in next. Now I'll dissolve the yeast a bit more in it. By the way, if you dissolve yeast in water, it also distributes much better throughout the dough. As a result, the outcome is sometimes, or even mostly, better. Let's check everything here with the spatula. All right. Well, and now I just add my flour mixture on top. Now I knead the whole thing on medium speed for about 3 to 5 minutes, depending, of course, on your machine. The machine I have has a very powerful motor and good geometry. As for the dough hook, that means I also need to knead less, but around that amount of time is all you need. So I'll see you again in a moment when the dough is ready. The dough has now been in my machine for 4 minutes. This is what it looks like. I'm going to take it out in a moment, but before I do that, I first need a baking cloth. In this case, I've deliberately chosen a dish towel because I always assume not every user has a special linen baking cloth at home that's made specifically for baking. And now I need to dust it with flour because we're about to place the loaf of bread into the cloth. There's nothing here now. No intermediate proofing in the true sense where I would let the dough rest in the bowl, but instead I immediately shape it, make a loaf right away. The dough is wonderful, really nice and silky, as I always say. That's exactly how it should be. Now I'm shaping a loaf, an oblong one. Not too long, because I'm going to put it later into baskets, into proofing baskets that are 20 centimeters long. And very important, I'm making 2 loaves from this. That means I'll divide it in the middle later. And the special thing about this bread is that I divide it lengthwise after the first proofing, that is after the dough rest, and then I have 2 cut surfaces. And these cut surfaces will be on top later. I'll brush those with water, but I'll show you that in a moment. So now I have my loaf here. Where I pinch it together a bit, that doesn't matter. It'll be turned over anyway in a moment. Plenty of flour underneath so it doesn't stick. Now I place it here in my cloth, set it in the middle, pull it up here once, pull it up there once, fold it over, cover it, and leave it here in the room. Now for 30 minutes, it's nice and warm here. It might not be quite as warm at your place, so it could be 35 or 40 minutes, but that's really enough to continue working with it. So it gets a little break now, and so do we. The dough for our Heidebrot has now rested for 30 minutes, so it had time to develop. Now I can take the cloth away. You'll see it has turned out beautifully. What I'm going to do now, I need to explain a little bit. I have 2 baskets here, 2 proofing baskets, which I have dusted with rye flour. Each half of this dough will go into one of them in a moment. Now I'm going to turn the dough over. I'm going to sprinkle some flour here because I need 2 things at once now. I need a knife. I'm going to cut it in the middle now. I rub the knife with a little oil first. I can only recommend this because the dough does tend to stick to the knife a bit. And the oil will soon be on the cut surface because we're going to place the dough or the dough piece rotated 90 degrees into the basket here. I also press it together a bit so that it fits in there. That's how it's supposed to be. You'll see that later. That's also really good for the bread. I hope you can see it from the overhead camera. Now I'm dividing my dough piece. Still on the cloth, and you can see it's already quite a sticky affair. But it works well. I then take it in my hand like this, and you can see again how nicely it has risen. Now I have my basket here, and I also place it into the basket. Of course, I do the same with this one now. That one's easier. I can already lift the cloth up. I can set this aside for a moment now. And here too, I place it into the basket. Now I have both pieces. That was still relatively easy. Now I'm going to do the following, and this is what's special about this bread. I go to the cut surface here, press it a bit better into the basket, and moisten the cut surface. Wet. Don't hold back. Don't be stingy with the water. It's fine for it to be like this. That's good. You'll see later how beautifully it shapes the bread. And of course, now I have the chance to spread it really well into the basket. That's not the best German I'm using right now, but I think you'll understand what I mean. The water also prevents this from drying out, of course. So now I have 2 nice pieces of dough here, and I'll cover them with a cloth. And again, they'll stay like this. Another 30 minutes for the final proof. After that, I'll just say this in advance, I use my left hand. Wet, I take the basket, place the dough onto my left hand, and turn it out like this, onto my baking tray so that the cut side is facing up again. But first, I'll let it rest for 30 minutes so it can develop well. The Heidebrot has now been in its final proof for 35 minutes. Let me show you what it looks like. You can already see how well it has risen. Now I need some water. As I said, I have to place it onto my wet hand in a moment. But first, I want to show you again exactly what happened. I can press in the indentation and it springs back up slightly. You can also see the cracks that have formed here. That's exactly how it should be. Now, I place it on my tray with some space between them. For that, I wet my hand a little here. That's important too. And I just turn it over like this. You can see how easy the whole thing is. If the basket gets a little wet in the process, honestly, it'll dry out again. So now take a look at how nicely it sits on the tray. The spacing it has is important. And now I take some more water and I give both of them a little back massage. That's really important because then the crust will split open nicely afterwards and turn out beautiful. It gets crispy, doesn't dry out, and has everything a good, delicious bread needs. Also, the little edge down here with the flour afterwards. That happens because I turned them 90 degrees and, of course, placed them in the floured baskets. Now they go into the oven at 210 degrees for 15 minutes with steam. Then I let the steam out, reduce the heat to 180 degrees, and bake them for a total baking time of 40 to 45 minutes. So, into the oven, and then we'll see what happens. The Heidebrot has now been in the oven for exactly 45 minutes. It's still a little warm, but it's baked through nicely. Nice and crispy, as you can hear. That's how it looks. This is the flour edge. That's because we turned it 90 degrees. It smells wonderful. It's a beautiful sourdough bread. Very delicious. I hope you enjoyed our video today. As always, you'll find the recipe for this bread in our video description. Thank you for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time on our channel. See you then.